suddenly woke up. It's a world full of man-eaters. At night it turns into pure chaos. This Haruko has no head. Instead, it has a terrifying saw-like abyss. In this abandoned city, Maru and Kiruko are on their journey. They found only a few ruined areas in the city. It was eerily silent and lifeless. They decided to investigate the area. After some searching, Maru and Kiruko found a house that was still standing, but the front door wouldn't budge, so they decided to climb in through a broken window. While looking around, Maru discovered some brand new toilet paper in a cabinet. This find made Kiruko really happy, because Kiruko thought she could finally enjoy a small luxury. So after clearing the weeds around the toilet, Kiruko decided to use the toilet and savor the moment. But she realized the toilet had no door. They went to look for supplies in the other rooms, but they stumbled upon a horrifying sight in one of them. Those who didn't survive the disaster seemed to have starved to death. This meant the house had no edible food left. Even Maru and Kiruko couldn't find anything worth eating. So they settled for weeds and a can of food that had been sitting there for ages. Kiruko's cooking seemed promising at first. Maru thought it would at least fill his stomach, but in reality, it tasted awful. That night, they decided to rest in the same room. Kiruko held a photo in her hands and stared at it. Maru casually asked if the person in the photo was her boyfriend. Kiruko replied that one of them was just a friend, and the other was someone she deeply wanted to find. Maru offered to help her look for them while acting as her bodyguard. But the outside world was far from peaceful. Countless man-eaters began to emerge in the darkness. Night is when the man-eaters come out. The next morning, Maru and Kiruko set off on their journey bright and early. Today, they planned to search for signs of other people. They decided to follow the railway tracks. After walking for a short time, they encountered a group of bandits, who quickly surrounded them. The bandits were especially happy to see Kiruko, as women were rare in the post-disaster world. After all, it was tough for women to survive alone in such dangerous times. Kiruko quickly pulled out her pistol. The bandits laughed, thinking it was just a toy gun meant to scare them. The bandits rushed at them, thinking they had nothing to fear. Maru used his fighting skills and fought the bandits one by one. Later on, they realized Kiruko's gun was no toy. The bullet hit a wooden post nearby, splitting it cleanly in two and sending splinters flying. The bandits flinched, their confidence shaken as they realized the power of Kiruko's shot. After the fight, Maru and Kiruko searched the bandits' hideout. It was a risky move, but it paid off. The two managed to take enough supplies to last them a while. They continued their journey. After the intense fight they had just been through, Kiruko was too exhausted and just lay down on the ground. But Maru knew they couldn't stay out in the open after dark. They'd become easy prey for the man-eater. After some searching, they found an old hotel that seemed abandoned but intact. The place could be claimed for practically nothing, as money had lost its value after the disaster. The innkeeper seemed to care mostly about making a little money. This place felt like paradise for Maru and Kiruko. There was not only a safe place to rest, but they could also enjoy a relaxing bath. After the bath, Maru helped Kiruko dry her hair. It was then that Kiruko noticed a gun barrel in the corner of the room. The innkeeper warned them that monsters often came out at night. She told them never to wander outside after dark. Maru and Kiruko were thrilled to hear about the monsters. To them, it meant another chance to fight and defeat man-eaters. Soon after, dinner was served. The starving duo ate without a second thought. The innkeeper casually mentioned that morals and ethics often don't apply in the post-disaster world. But relationships between close relatives were still considered taboo. She explained that such relationships could lead to genetic problems. Maru and Kiruko listened without responding. 5 years post-disaster had blurred many societal norms, but some things still remained off the limits. The innkeeper's boldness was surprising, but she seemed genuinely concerned. Maru tried to change the subject with a random comment. Kiruko calmly explained their situation. The innkeeper blushed, realizing she had misunderstood. She admitted she had overanalyzed their relationship. She explained she used to work in a tough place and had seen too much. Kiruko shared that she had been assigned to protect Maru. They clarified their relationship was purely professional. After this, Maru kept his distance, even while sleeping. It was clear from his expression that Maru was sulking. Kiruko didn't seem too concerned. She simply lay down to rest. At this moment, the innkeeper unfastened her gun belt. She took out some bullets, loaded her gun, and held it close to her chest. She noticed something strange, a shadow moving on the glass behind her. Suddenly, gunshots echoed through the air. Kiruko turned around instantly. But whatever it was, had vanished. Kiruko quickly woke Maru up. Together, they rushed outside to investigate. Maru was still trying to process what was happening. Kiruko suggested he drink some cold water to snap out of it. They started to suspect the innkeeper had drugged their meal to keep them unconscious. Meanwhile, the innkeeper stood guard with her shotgun, keeping an eye out for the monster. She didn't realize Maru and Kiruko were right behind her. Before they could act, the monster darted toward them at lightning speed. Luckily, Maru and Kiruko reacted just in time to dodge. Maru noticed that the monster had 3 whip-like appendages on each arm. To get close, they realized they had to destroy the whips first. Before they could strategize, the monster found them again. The two panicked and fled as fast as they could. While running, Kiruko turned and fired at the monster. She managed to injure one of its arms and a wing. Maru praised Kiruko, calling him a sharpshooter. While they discussed their next move, the innkeeper appeared at the scene. As the monster loomed closer, Maru used the flashlight to distract the monster, following their plan. Meanwhile, Kiruko hid behind a car, waiting for the right moment. But just as she was about to take action, the innkeeper knocked into Kiruko. This caused her shot to miss. Shockingly, the innkeeper stepped in to shield the monster. She claimed the monster was her son. Kiruko was stunned and tried to make sense of her words. It turned out she believed the monster was her son. She thought the creature had saved her life once. Kiruko wasn't convinced. She pointed out that these creatures always attacked and devoured their prey. The innkeeper insisted the monster had protected her during an earlier attack. Hearing this bizarre explanation, Maru reluctantly agreed to leave the monster alone for now. They decided there was no point in attacking unless it became a threat. Yet tragedy struck unexpectedly. The monster turned on the innkeeper and devoured her. Kiruko looked away, unable to process the horror. But as the monster turned its attention toward them, Maru acted swiftly. He used his power and digged into creature's chest, striking its heart directly. Maru and Kiruko was also deeply shaken by what had happened. Still, they knew staying rational was their only chance of survival. Kiruko realized she lacked the mental strength to handle such situations. The next morning, Maru and Kiruko prepared to move on. Maru and Kiruko left the hotel, even though the monster had been defeated. Maru wondered why the monster hadn't attacked the innkeeper earlier. Their analysis led to some theories. Perhaps the monster was controlled by what the innkeeper believed to be her son. Or maybe it was just the monster's natural instincts. Either way, it seemed designed to lure people into its territory. There was even a possibility the innkeeper had been feeding guests to the monster, but they chose not to dwell on it. They resumed their search for heaven. Kiruko suddenly remembered what happened to her. A boy in another part of the wasteland provoked a monster beyond his capability. The monster attacked him with its devastating force. Kiruko risked her life to pull the boy from the monster's jaws. By then, the boy had already been swallowed from the chest down. When he woke up, he found he had undergone brain surgery and was in a woman's body. The body had originally belonged to Kiruko's sibling. The boy's name was Haruki. Now he went by Kiruko. One day, Maru confessed his feelings to Kiruko. Kiruko was caught completely off guard by the confession. Maru awkwardly exclaimed, to break the silence. This is where Kiruko told the story of what happened to her. They faced tension in the air as they avoided discussing it further. The monster began charging energy before unleashing a deadly attack. At that moment, they reached the interior of an old warehouse. Kiruko deliberately opened the door to lure the strange fish inside. Once inside, they found the place filled with cardboard boxes. Maru was confused as to why Kiruko had chosen this spot. She explained that the boxers would restrict the strange fish's movements. The strange fish slithered closer behind them. The strange fish brushed against a dry cardboard box with traces of something flammable. The fish's body began absorbing the flammable substance. In seconds, the fish became severely dehydrated. The strange fish flopped weakly on the ground. Maru seized the opportunity to use his ability to destroy the creature completely. After ensuring the creature was dead, a cargo ship docked nearby. To thank them for their assistance, the captain handed them 25,000 yen. But Kiruko declined the money. She instead showed the captain a pistol and asked, "Do you recognize this emblem?" The captain admitted he didn't. But one of the crew members claimed to have seen it before. He identified it as the logo of the Mitsuba company. He had spotted it in an old building ahead. This revelation excited Maru and Kiruko. They decided to continue searching for clues. Kiruko would trade supplies and gather information. Meanwhile, Maru looked through an old game console, trying to piece together his past. Suddenly, a group of thugs arrived. They were hostile toward strangers. Maru ignored them, which only provoked their anger. They decided to teach him a lesson. They knocked Maru to the ground. Instead of fear, Maru seemed strangely exhilarated. He felt it was rare to encounter such intensity. Just then, Kiruko arrived. She subdued the thugs before they could escape. She warned that things could escalate if they called reinforcements. She surprised Maru by checking his teeth. Maru blushed at the unexpected gesture. Embarrassed, he quickly grabbed his bag and ran. To uncover more about heaven, Kiruko asked Maru about any clues from his childhood. Maru recalled being born post-cataclysm. As a child, he lived with other kids in a large facility. That stability only lasted for about 2.5 years. At age 7, adults forced everyone to leave, scattering the children. Left alone, he joined a group of scavengers. He spent 3 years salvaging resources. One day, their leader was killed over a territorial dispute. Wandering alone, Maru met Makura 2.5 years later. Makura taught Maru how to fight and defend himself. When Maru met Makura, he didn't even know where he was, let alone have any real leads. Makura suggested selling old comic books to gain resources and information. It was a way to trade for intel. Makura advised Maru to burn books that contained useful knowledge after reading them. Knowledge was a valuable asset in the wasteland. Fearing the thugs might recognize Maru, Kiruko decided to go out on her own. She was right to be cautious. Local thugs were actively searching for Maru. However, the thugs didn't seem overly concerned about him personally. Their attention was more on an organization from Fuxing Province that had arrived in the area. Kiruko remembered hearing Lu Min mention something about Fuxing Province. It was rumored they aimed to rebuild pre-disaster civilization. They reportedly abducted people with technical expertise. When Kiruko returned to the hideout, she found the door slightly ajar. Inside, the room was eerily empty. It felt unsettling, like a ghost had passed through. Finding Maru safe relieved Kiruko's anxiety. Maru didn't understand why he felt so flustered earlier. The thought of Maru being gone had shaken her. Time felt slower during that moment of panic. Kiruko and Maru shared a few awkward words. Their conversation trailed off into small, unsure remarks. Kiruko managed to trade a small artifact for a map the next day. They used it to plan a route around safe water sources. Any place claiming to be heaven had to have safe, clean water. Just outside the stone door, a sudden knock startled Maru and Kiruko. They thought it might be the gangsters returning. Instead, it was the older man they had met earlier. He was the same man who had traveled with them before. He admitted that he wanted to hire them as bodyguards. His destination was a place called the Immortal Order. Rumor had it that a doctor there could grant immortality. Hearing this, Kiruko pulled out a photo from her pocket and showed it to him. Unfortunately, the man had never been there. He also didn't know what the doctor looked like. He asked them to protect both him and his luggage. He explained that strange creatures called Haruko were full of valuable materials. He claimed that transplanting parts of a Haruko could make someone immortal. He pulled out some tissue he had taken from a Haruko corpse. When Maru and Kiruko examined it, they found the tissue was decayed. The man's hope crumbled at the sight. Seeing his despair, Kiruko handed him 20,000 yen as payment for information about the Immortal Order. Then Maru and Kiruko continued their journey to find heaven. Later, following their map, Maru and Kiruko arrived in a new town. They asked a local girl and quickly learned the location of a water source. As they prepared to leave, the girl offered them shelter. Maru politely refused, saying they were just passing through. They didn't plan to stay. The girl looked disappointed. But Kiruko thought it might be wise to leave some of their luggage in a safe place. She suggested leaving it in a dormitory. The girl happily agreed to store it for them. A moment later, Maru realized Kiruko had agreed to this to save money on carrying everything. It would also keep their valuables safe. When they entered, Maru and Kiruko discovered a water source. However, the water was stagnant and murky. It wasn't suitable for drinking. As they inspected the surroundings, they stumbled upon a man lying on a stone slab. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was one of the thugs they had encountered earlier. He was severely injured. With his last bit of strength, the man begged them to save his brother. He explained that they had been attacked by a monster. The man's brother hadn't responded for some time. At that moment, Kiruko quickly threw a rock to distract the monster and fled the scene with Maru. The monster, now enraged, chased after Maru. Kiruko shot at a nearby pillar to create a diversion. The falling pillar struck the monster, temporarily incapacitating it. The monster appeared to be unconscious. Maru used his abilities to deliver a decisive blow to the creature. For a moment, the monster lay still. Maru and Kiruko stood in disbelief. Suddenly, the monster regained consciousness. They immediately scrambled to escape. Maru shouted in panic, questioning why it wasn't staying down. They both screamed as they ran. They managed to climb to a high platform, just out of the monster's reach. The monster lingered below, waiting for an opportunity. Reflecting on the encounter, Maru shivered with fear, wondering how they had survived. He muttered nervously to himself. Kiruko tried to calm him down. She remarked that they needed to stay sharp. She reassured him they'd figure something out. Kiruko joked that if necessary, she'd throw him ahead as bait. Thankfully, the monster didn't seem capable of climbing up. It continued to guard their position below. Hours passed, and the monster was still there. The sky had turned pitch black. The temperature dropped sharply. Eventually, the monster seemed to vanish. Maru and Kiruko prepared to move on. They realized their ray gun had just one bullet remaining. Kiruko removed the battery to recharge it. However, the battery slipped and fell. Maru panicked, unsure of how to fix it. Kiruko decided they couldn't take any chances if the monster returned. They needed to eliminate it. Kiruko resolved to take the offensive. Suddenly, the monster reappeared, catching them off guard. Maru scrambled back onto the platform in a panic. He didn't expect the monster to ambush them. After reloading the weapon, they discussed their next move. At this moment, the monster retreated into the shadows. Maru used this chance to act quickly and jumped into action. Kiruko followed, sliding down cautiously with the situation. Kiruko's grip slipped suddenly, sending her falling backward. Maru managed to catch her securely, rolling slightly to absorb the impact. Just then, the monster charged at Kiruko with full force. Kiruko maintained her composure and fired a shot directly at the monster's head. Once the monster fell, Kiruko felt a brief sense of relief. Soon, a rescue team arrived, though one of the injured thugs didn't make it. The team spoke to a girl who had been aiding in the situation. She described someone from earlier, saying he moved like the wind. She muttered an odd phrase before walking away. Kiruko noticed something suspicious about the situation. The map marked the water source as completely safe. It seemed like a trap designed to lure prey into monster territory. Maru didn't seem concerned about the revelation. Instead, his thoughts were preoccupied elsewhere. Kiruko showed Maru a photo from her childhood, explaining her past. She asked him if this changed his perception. Maru responded confidently, indicating that it didn't matter to him. The tension between them dissipated almost instantly. A girl who had been nearby suddenly entered the room. She reminded them to keep the room quiet and tidy. She also insisted that they not mess up the mattress. Her peculiar remarks left them slightly confused. Then, she unexpectedly dragged Maru to another room. Before Maru could even process what was happening, she had already settled onto the bed. She stated boldly that for 800,000 yen, she would let him do whatever he wanted. The situation left Maru visibly flustered. Maru fidgeted nervously, his mind racing to make sense of the moment. The tension startled him even more. Hearing the noise, Kiruko entered the room abruptly. She questioned what was happening, her tone sharp. The confusion continued as Maru struggled to explain. Afterward, Maru reflected on how chaotic the encounter had been, still puzzled by his own reactions. By the next morning, they greeted the day and resumed their journey in search of heaven.